Well, I'm here with Evelyn from the UK, who I was introduced. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, and I was told about you by some former Jehovah's Witnesses activists who, talked about it would be really good to do a blog about women, particularly being abused inside of cults. And Kimmy, in particular, who works with me, said, just how there are women who are uh, hit and their husbands cheat on them, and the husbands are fine, but the women, are punished if they cheat, but not the guys, really. And all kinds of terrible things where there's just total disparity of human rights.
Yeah.
And the ideology is such that women just should, submit to whatever their husband wants, whether it's a demand for sex, even if they're ill, even if they aren't attracted to their husband, they have to submit and obey. And so I read your blog post about the Jehovah's Witness newsletter. I guess it was in December of,
The December Watchtower. Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself, because
Okay.
there'll be some new people. Tell us about you and your activism.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for inviting me on. Firstly, I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness, third generation. My grandparents became Jehovah's Witnesses on my mom's side back in the late 30s, early 40s. My mom was baptized when she was 6.
Wow.
So by the time I was born, it was all I knew. I was just completely brought up in it. I was brought up that this is what normal life is.
Yeah, heavy indoctrination. I just did a blog about child baptisms and how can children be mature enough to make a lifetime commitment to anything?
Yeah, well, that's actually I've written a blog about that, because the Watchtower has actually sort of like gone back and forth as to how early it's acceptable to baptize somebody, because when I got baptized, I was 15, and around that time they tended not to encourage young children to get baptized, because they said you have to do it you have to have reasoned on the reason why you want to actually become a Jehovah's Witness, and you can't make that decision if you're too young.
And I think 15 is too young.
Well, now I do.
I have a 15-year-old son. Definitely.
Yeah, I know. My son's 15 as well. And no, the decisions that he makes, I know that in 10 years' time, he's going to look back and he's going to, oh, why did I do that?
Right. And we know now the brain doesn't even fully mature until you're 25. Yeah. It's not even 21.
Yeah.
But let's go back to your story. Yeah. Third generation.
Yeah. So, I mean, my mom was a special pioneer. She pioneered in various places. So her and my grandfather was congregation servant, which was before the elders arrangement. He was the one that was in charge of the congregation.
So it was a big shot.
Yeah. So I was brought up in the house, we had this huge Watchtower library of stuff going back to the 30s and what have you. And I just accepted it as normal. I got baptized when I was 15, and I left school a year later and pioneered after I did a 3-month course, a secretarial course, because I was very much aware of the fact that you want to be able to sort of earn as much money as you can in the small amount of hours that you can, and secretarial work paid better than cleaning, which my mum had done. Plus I had a physical injury from an accident, which meant that I wasn't going to be physically capable of doing cleaning as a job.
Right, and especially because Armageddon is coming for those people who aren't.
I mean, I had such interests. There's so many things I would have loved to have been. I would have loved to have been an artist. Well, I do try and do that now, but I would have loved to have been an architect. or even an astronaut. I mean, I had a
Great.
real varied interest in all kinds of things, but I didn't pursue any higher education simply because, well, the year after I got baptized was the UN Year of Peace and Security. And one of the doctrines of the Jehovah's Witnesses is that not long before Armageddon, there would be this cry of peace and security worldwide that would be a false cry of peace and security, and that after that, sudden destruction will be upon us.
Yes, it's always imminent, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's imminent, or in the next year or two or three.
Exactly. And so when the UN made this announcement, it was this feeling of this sort of very primal feeling that you had to save yourself and save as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And so,
by the way, so I was in the Moonies at age 19, and Armageddon was going to happen within a few years too. So I dropped out of school, and
I didn't realize that about the Moonies until I started sort of like watching some of your videos, and that I found that really interesting because, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses view the Moonies as a cult.
Right. Well, that's why so many people were reading Combating Cult Mind Control, because the Moonies are a cult, and then they realize, oh, wait a minute, the bite model applies to us too, and what does that mean? But I'd say, as a generalization, it really helps people recover to understand mind control and social psychology, but also to understand the parallels with all these other groups that think they have God in a bottle, that they have the one true interpretation of the Bible, or they have the one true prophet or the one true Messiah, and everyone else are cults. And then when you step back and look at the big picture, it's kind of what I say: walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, has feathers like a duck, quack quack.
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't heard of your writing or the bite model at all until I sort of started researching XJW stuff at the beginning of this year.
So when did you leave, Evelyn? When did you wake up?
I left in 92, but I didn't wake up until the end of last year. So I believed I was going to die at Armageddon.
The program phobias.
Yeah.
Wow.
I in the video that I know you're going to link to, it was fascinating because I related to everything that was said, and where you talked about I've actually made some notes because it was just so spot on, the cult identity, and like having there's sort of like there's you, but there's the cult identity, and I was still under the control of this person that had been almost created by the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was a child.
Yeah.
That even though I knew I couldn't be a Jehovah's Witness because there was something inside me that told me I couldn't do it.
What I call the authentic self.
Yeah.
The real you.
I refused to bring my children up as Jehovah's Witnesses, even though I believed that Armageddon was coming. It was, I mean, classic cognitive dissonance.
Split, right. It's called a dissociative disorder in mental health terms.
I'm still a total mess because I still have this.
You're going to get better and better as you understand it, because the theme of my work is, if you want to be free from destructive mind control, you need to know your authentic self. You need to understand the paradigms of mind control and how it works, and how what distinguishes destructive cults from legitimate or religions and organizations. And then you need to use your own mind, your own authentic self, to exit counsel your cult self in order to be one single healthy person who's a survivor of having been raised in a mind control cult.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm going to look at actually getting specific exit therapy, because I'm realizing that the effects of the cult identity then carried on for all of those years.
Yeah.
I stayed in an abusive marriage, even though my the the person that I married wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, I still had the mindset of what was an acceptable way to behave.
Right.
And so I stayed in that marriage, and it's only literally the last couple of years that I've managed to extricate myself. And
so that's fascinating. So in other words, the abusive husband wasn't someone you had married while you were in the group. It was someone you met.
Yeah, basically he was I ran from the Jehovah's Witnesses. I left where I was living, and I met him, and I moved in the same day.
Yeah. So I've heard
I
this
used him as in a
so
way.
many times, not just with people from the witnesses, but other cults where they're just looking for somebody in the outside world
Yeah.
to say, help me, give me a place to stay, give me shelter, and they often are abusive relationships because there's no critical thinking about who is this person, what are their backgrounds, etc. It's heartbreaking, but it's very, very common. And before we go further, I just want to mention the video is about a woman that I helped named Laura. It's on my website in a blurred version to protect her identity. She actually has a PhD and she's a nurse. She's given me permission when I'm training mental health professionals to show the unblurred one, but for the public. But you can hear her testimony. You can hear her story about being in another cult called the Boston Church of Christ, or the International Churches of Christ, which is what they call now. But she was describing being forced to have sex when she didn't want to by her husband inside the cult, and threatening to kill her, to kill himself.
Yeah.
Her shoving him shoving her down and threatening, etc. And she left the group, and for 11 years she was misdiagnosed in the mental health system, suicidal, cutting herself, and had this split identity, and no one in the mental health field diagnosed her properly. She was put on reams of different medications. And it was when she read Combating Cult Mind Control, she contacted me and said, you mentioned Boston Church of Christ. I was in it as a leader. I'm wondering if you can help me. And she described having been in and out of psychiatric hospitals. And I said, let me talk to your psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, Laura is one of the most functional and least functional people I've ever met in my life as a career. If you can help her, please do. And she came up and did an intensive with me, which is basically 6 hours a day, 3 hours in the morning, hour and a half lunch, and 3 hours in the afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday off. And all of her symptoms went away in 5 days.
That's
and
incredible.
got off all of her medication. And she was like, I don't want to hurt myself anymore. I don't have these suicidal thoughts anymore. And so she begged me to share when I was doing this training for the psychiatrist Judy Herman, who's an expert on trauma. She begged me to come and tell her story. And normally with a former client, I would never involve a former client in a training, but she said this will be therapeutic for me to tell my story. And so, after talking with her psychiatrist and her psychologist, it's like, okay, she wants to do this. And it's been a great teaching. So anyway, back to your story. I just wanted to insert that in this video.
Definitely, because
I don't read the blog, but they listen to the video and maybe they'll pick it up.
I related to everything that she said, and this is one of the things is I look back, and it's not just my experiences of things that I was directly taught when I was in the Kingdom Hall, but it's even little things like family stories. For instance, I knew that my aunt's husband used to hit her. And I knew that she had tried to leave him, but had been told by the elders that she could, but she would always be marked in the congregation as somebody that wasn't spiritually strong. And that obviously would mean that she'd be viewed as sort of not somebody that was good association.
I'm sorry for laughing because it's
Yeah,
so
no.
pathetic.
Yeah, and this was back in the 60s. And then I know that in the 70s, my mum approached the elders because she, I have to say that my father never hit my mom. He reserved that for me. But she wanted to know what her options were then, and she was told exactly the same thing. And it was, even though she was a faithful Jehovah's Witness until she died in 2003,
Yeah.
she did apologize to me quite near the end, and she said to me that if she had to do it all over again, she would have left him, because she realized that it was not a healthy way to live. So even
would she have left the group too, or just left?
No, definitely not.
She didn't get to that next level, in other words.
Yeah. I mean, I think that she had questions, but she never vocalized them, and she was always so convinced that it was the truth. And that's something interesting listening to you, is I didn't realize how many other groups out there refer to their teachings as the truth. I honestly,
tens of thousands.
I thought that was a unique thing to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Of course you did, because that was your frame of reference your entire life.
Yeah.
By the way, I did a blog on corporal punishment and how traumatic it is for children's development, and how it conditions obedience without encouraging critical thinking and authentic self-conscience development, which is what's really healthy. So that's another thing you should read, another blog.
I will do. Yeah, I've got a lot of work to do because I've woken up so recently. I'm viewing myself as, my activism is almost part of, I'm viewing myself as a project, and I'm trying to help other people in the process of helping myself.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's
join the club. Me too.
Yeah.
I left 42 years ago after my family did an intervention with me, but it's been a learning about what happened to me. And I was lucky. I was only involved for 2.5 years, but man, they did a number on me big time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, even if I can just help one person. And I was very lucky that one person that I knew back then that had become a Jehovah's Witness when I was pioneering. For your viewers, that's full-time preaching work.
Right.
She contacted me and said, I recognize you from YouTube. Are you this person that I used to know? And I said, yes. Oh my God, it's you. And we were talking about everything, and she's no longer a Jehovah's Witness either. And it was fascinating to actually have all of my memories validated, that I wasn't remembering things incorrectly, that I wasn't being bitter about my memories. I wasn't sort of putting something on, I wasn't sort of imagining things wrong.
Right.
Very often you think to yourself, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm just making more out of it because, I'm so damaged in other ways. And, then you realize that, no, I've remembered this correctly. And actually it was probably worse than I remember.
So when you're in one of these groups, especially if you're born in it, you're always trained that if there's a problem or an issue with the leader, the doctrine, or the group, it's always your fault.
Yes.
So you're trained to blame yourself and to put yourself down. Yes. But then the other part is all the phobia indoctrination, all the rules, etc. That what you're describing is exactly what's healthy, which is get out of the isolation, learn and research, talk to people who you knew in the group where you can share experiences. And honestly, it's like an onion. You peel back some of the memories and you actually find out other ones that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the good news is the mind wants to heal itself, right? If the mind understands the do's and don'ts.
Yes.
Like a lot of people will get out of a mind control group, get into a controlling relationship, or get into another mind control group and
Yeah.
another mind control group and another, because it's trying to heal itself from the initial mind control group. But once you understand the paradigm and you go, aha, and
Yeah.
part of that is understanding what's normal or healthy.
Yeah.
You need to understand, if I wasn't raised in a mind control group, what should my childhood been like?
Yeah.
And what is healthy parenting?
Yeah.
And it's not hitting your kid and threatening your kid and emotionally abusing your kid. It's about listening and validating and loving the child and encouraging the child to learn, to
Yeah.
make mistakes so that the kid isn't got a syndrome about perfectionism
Yeah.
and all of that. We could talk forever, but I want to make sure, because the focus of this particular blog is about abuse of women because of this,
Yeah.
religious frame and I've worked with ex ultra Orthodox Jews. I've worked with people who were raised in fundamentalist Christian homes where they were told the women have no rights. Very similarly to
Yes.
the cult groups as well, and Muslim or religious situations as well. So there's this meta frame about women not having equal rights to men. But
Yeah.
then it gets even worse when you're in a destructive mind control cult.
Mm.
And I just want you to take a moment and share with whoever's listening, especially if they're a woman, maybe they're still in a group, maybe they're out but are still struggling. Like, what do you think is the most important points that you'd like to share for them?
I think that you internally listen to yourself, listen to that voice inside you that tells you that something's not right. Because because of the way I was brought up, I was always taught to push that voice down, to silence it, because that was evil.
Right.
And that voice wasn't my voice. That voice was from the devil.
Right. Selfish.
Yeah. And I've realized that if you listen to yourself, you're actually a better person. You can actually help more people. You can be more of a fully rounded individual. If you are selfish to an extent, you need to self-care. Is one of the things that I'm always talking about, tweeting about, blogging about, YouTubing about. It's so important because I've done so little of it over the years, and I'm trying to catch up now and realize that if I look after myself, so if there's anybody out there, if you're in a relationship and you find that you're always being told that your friends are not the right sort of friends, or the interests you have are not good enough, or the ideas that you have are not important, or if you're asked your opinion, if your opinion is then denigrated, or you're told that you don't know anything even though you do. If any of those things are happening, actually stop and realize that you're not the one at fault. It's the other person, or it's the organization that's telling you things that's at fault. And find a way of speaking to your own self, and find a way, for the sake of your sanity and for the sake of your mental health and your physical health, because it has an effect on both. Find a way of speaking to somebody that isn't in that situation, that isn't part of that organization, or that it isn't involved in the family situation, somebody that is more objective. Speak to them and then get some help, and hopefully then you can extricate yourself. And I speak from somebody who's been in abusive situations as part of a cult, but also from a personal perspective that wasn't part of a cult, but that was related to the way I was brought up, how I viewed myself. So I think it's really important that you trust yourself, you trust your inner voice, and you allow yourself to believe in your own worth.
such words of wisdom. It really is so true, and that, if something is true, it will stand up to scrutiny.
Exactly.
And if you are your own best friend and treat yourself with respect and listen,
Yeah.
and explore your thoughts and ideas, and connect to outsiders. That's part of the mind control, is they draw this us versus them
Very much.
curtain, that the outside world is evil and satanic and we
Yes.
are God, etc. To realize that people are people, and there are good people out there and there are not so good people out there, but I believe people are basically good. And when given a chance, people are going to rise up to a higher level versus stoop down to lower level. Um, so abuse is never okay. Beating, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse is never okay.
Yeah.
And get professional help, but it really helps to find someone who knows about cults.
Yes.
It really helps a lot. I wanna do a plug for the Open Minds Foundation, openmindsfoundation.org. They're in the UK as well as in the United States. And they can connect you with therapists if you're looking for cult-aware therapists. I am hoping, if I ever can get it together and have more time, I'm in a doctoral program myself, but to do some online webinars and things that might help people around the world as well. But it's just an honor to talk to you, and I appreciate your good work. And I'm delighted you met a friend who could validate you, from your childhood. And I
Yeah.
predict that there are many more out there. And if they're not out now, they'll be out in the next few years.
Hopefully. Yes.
Hopefully, especially if they're online.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm just seeing more and more TV shows and documentaries and Netflix shows about other cults.
Yeah.
And that's often what will start people thinking, that's just like my experience, when they look at things on other groups. And then before we end, is there any last thoughts, words, things that you'd like to add?
Actually, yes, something that I missed out of what I just said is that if you're in an abusive relationship, it's never your fault. Never. There is never a reason that it's your fault. And you know that, and get out, because that nobody should ever have the right to abuse you emotionally, mentally, or physically.
Right.
Yeah.
No, right. And abusers will often say, you made me lose my temper and hit you. It's your fault. Or you're so pretty, that's why I had to have sex with you. It's your fault. It's like, no, that's warped reasoning and blaming the victim and not taking responsibility. As a narcissist often will not take responsibility, etc. But you also hit on a key point that needs to be in place for this last words of wisdom you gave, which is you matter and you have self-worth.
Yes.
So if you feel your self-worth, you won't let people harm you.
Yes.
And
it's an ongoing thing, because you don't know that you're worth anything, but you have to daily hourly remind yourself that you are worth something. It's not something that you instantly now I know I'm worth something, so I'm fine now. It's an ongoing thing. It's something that you have to keep working on, but it's very worth it.
Right. So I'm going to just add a couple more things and then we'll wrap up. So standing in front of the mirror and talking to yourself and saying, you're valuable. Steve, you're valuable. You're a good guy, whatever. Evelyn, that helps. But also a visualization technique where you go back in time to younger yous and are giving that message to the younger you? Like
Yeah.
that you didn't have that, but you want to repair the part of your mind that's still programmed. So you have to go back into the programming where if your father was hitting you, your mother stops him or that she calls the police. You know, you can intervene with yourself. And even though it's not historically factual, emotionally and psychologically, you can heal yourself.
Yeah.
So there's strategies that I did with Laura in that week to reprocess some of these events, to basically exit her cult identity.
Yeah. That sounds like a very good strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the key question is, if I knew then what I know now, what would I do differently?
Yeah. Everything.
And if the answer is I would have left,
Yes.
you visualize, go back, visualize leaving.
Yes.
And ever since the internet, which I think was around 1995, 96, it started happening, people can now find help. You know, they
Yeah.
can find other ex-members, they can find knowledge and information.
The internet has been the best thing. It really has. You
Yeah.
know, you know.
The downside is most destructive cults are recruiting on the internet right now. And that people they really need to have that education about how to discern a
Yeah.
healthy group from a mind control group. In
Yeah.
any case, I want to thank you. This went really, really fast, and continued good work, and stay in touch.
I shall do. And thank you very much for asking me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for helping others and helping yourself. You deserve it.
Thank you. And it's been great talking to you.
Likewise. Take care.